Volunteering is a great way to get involved in the church and help out with important ministries and activities. But it takes so much time, and if you help out once, they'll ask you to keep helping out for every event in the future. That's why I recommend volunteering for something and doing a horrible job at it. I don't mean just being lazy or text messaging the whole time. I mean really getting in there and messing things up. Trip over things, knock things down, stain the carpet, maybe even start a small fire. Whatever it is, just be awful at it. This will ensure that they will never ask you to help again, and they won't expect you to volunteer for anything ever. You could also just politely decline when you're asked to help, but I believe actions speak louder than words. These have been Deep Thoughts from a Shallow Christian.
Okay, that is my new favorite one. That is funny. That is not what we would like you to do here at Alive Church. So we're going to talk about serving today and why it matters to you. We're starting a new mini-series, 2 weeks, called Walk the Talk, and today we're going to begin to lay the foundations and talk about the foundations of your life and how you can live in greatness and purpose that God intended you for. But first, take out your phones and silence them first, and then text me a response to this at this number. We like to get your engagement and you be part of the talk, so you can answer this. Tell me about the best boss you ever had or knew about. So maybe you've been lucky enough to work under some great bosses. I have a great boss who's not here today. I've had some other great bosses. Back when I worked in the corporate world, I had some really awful bosses, and I had some really good bosses. And it was so dramatic, the difference between the two. In fact, I had one, my last two were back-to-back. Really good and then really bad. So I was very happy to leave that place and move on to better things. But what is it? Who are they? And what was it about them that made them a great boss? I'll read a few of those towards the end of our talk. So we live in an instant everything world, microwave world. We want it, and we want it yesterday. Now would work too. We want it now. We want it yesterday. Time is of the essence. Give it to me now. I no longer have to take my phone out of my pocket. I get all of my messages right here. I don't even have, I can talk back to it, all of that kind of thing. Instant, fast. I can't even take the time to take my phone out of my pocket. I like gadgets, so don't judge me. It's okay. That's not part of what we're talking about today, but more importantly, the foundation of your life, your development. Because people were not made to be developed overnight. As humans, we are not microwave safe. When we jump the system, when we try to shortcut the system, inevitably things derail. Things go badly. We live here and we try to start here or try to start close to the top, and what happens is it's like pulling this out, right? What happens then? Everything comes crumbling down. So we see that in our culture today. We see people who are skyrocketed to fame and fortune, whether it be music or political or other parts of life, and then they come crumbling down because they never develop the foundations that it takes to live a great, successful life. So that's one of those things, or what we're going to talk about today in serving. So foundations. Jeff used a Jeep a few weeks ago, and it really sparked this talk for me, this illustration. So he's a big Jeep guy. Some of you are Jeepers, and I like to get out in the mud, and if it doesn't have mud from top to bottom, you haven't done it right. Get it really, really stuck even. I love getting stuck and then trying to get out and all of that kind of thing. But this is a base model. This is what you have to start with. If you need to get a base model if you're going to do substantial upgrades. And the dilemma is we want to shortcut the process because we'd like to drive the Rubicon, right? And if you Jeepers go, yeah. So the first one, 20-something thousand, 50-something thousand for a Rubicon. I mean, that's a lot of Jeep. But it's got a lot of stuff. And here's what that stuff looks like. So the dilemma in this process of how we live our lives, imagine is if I were trying to drive this down the road without the base model. silly, right? I can't, maybe if I welded it all together and stuck these things through the holes, I could push it down the road, but I would look silly, right? But that's in many cases how we live our lives. We try to shortcut life, and instead of growing in those foundational things that are going to lead us to purpose and greatness, we try to shortcut the system. So this is what it should look like when it's all tricked out. And the only thing that this doesn't have is the Arizona racing stripes that it should have from hitting brush and stuff, scrapes all down the side. Now that's what a Jeep should look like. And that's what a Jeep is made for. You have a purpose and a plan. And in many cases, you're living dysfunctionally because you're trying to shortcut the process. You're not building the foundation. So this foundation building is not the sexy part of life. Nobody says, hey, I just want to go out and build a great foundation of a life so that I can, because it's not fun, it's not exciting, but it does lead to true greatness. Planners understand that to get to a big dream, you have to build a big foundation in order to build that dream on. So you got to start with the base model. Now, I found another picture here. This is just incredibly wrong. This is so wrong in so many ways. I don't know who did this, but that is absolute sacrilege to Jeepers. You just don't do that kind of thing. Oh, it hurts me. That's just terrible, awful. So one of my favorite books, one of my favorite writers is Jim Collins. He wrote actually a 3-book series, but the 2 primary that I have read are Good to Great and Built to Last. In Good to Great, they focused on companies who had made the leap from a good company to a great company, and they did a lot of analysis and a lot of interviews to discover what are the commonalities of going to great and then staying great for a length of time. If you haven't read this and you're a businessman or woman, this is a great book for you. It will really help you understand what true great companies look like and what they're made of. Built to Last as well, Successful Habits from Visionary Companies. But building that foundation, one of those foundations is the leader of the organization. So one of the things they identified is there's 5 levels of leadership, 1 being the bottom, 5 being a level 5 leader. They got it all together. And all of these companies that had great success and went from good to great had a level 5 leader. And the X factor of those level 5 leaders was not personality, but humility. So initially, when I read the book, I was kind of looking at that and said, how could that be? What we see and hear and experience is all of the personality, but the reality of those successful, long-term successful companies was somebody who really was a servant, a servant leader, somebody who really understood the idea of serving the organization, serving the company, serving the employees, and obviously serving the customers in a great way. So I found a graph this week that took the 2, and so good was here, and a return on investment, you could expect 10.8% from the top 500 good companies. Big companies, 10.8%, I'd take that. That's pretty good today. But level 5 companies performed at a return rate of 17.5%. So those are the companies that had level 5 leaders who understood the value of servant leadership. But there's another group that since has been discovered, paralleling the book, and they're servant leadership companies. So they're companies that part of their foundation as an organization is the understanding of servant leadership. And we serve one another, and we serve our consumers, and we serve our employees at such a great level that it's one of the core beliefs behind the company. Those companies performed at 24.2%. Now, I'm not an investment guy, but I'm going with these guys over here, right? Yeah, that's who I want to go with. And it all came down to serving. Serving to develop towards greatness. So coming in the late summer, we're going to have a series, and it's called The 5 Habits of Highly Successful Christians. These are the habits that we know and have seen and are proven to develop you to a place, if you're a Christ follower, of great purpose, great mission, great fulfillment, great joy, great peace in your life. All of these things that I assume we would all desire greatly can be had, and the Scripture talks about them often. We're going to talk about those 5 habits. Well, today we're going to hit one of them, and that is being the servant, being a servant of those around us, serving in our families, serving in our homes, serving at our place of work, and serving in the body. So Jesus, as we head towards Easter, this is some of the transition points where he was already beginning to talk to the disciples about what was coming next. He began to kind of shift his mode and gives the final parting words, and this was one of those. And several of these circumstances come up, and we'll talk about a few of those verses. If you've got your Bible, you can open them up to Matthew 23, 11 through 12. If you've got your phone, you can go to Bible.com, or if you've got the YouVersion app, you can open up there and follow along as well. Jesus said, "The greatest among you must be a" what? Servant. "But those who exalt themselves will be humbled." Another good word here is humiliated. All those who humble themselves will be exalted. So we've seen those people in our world today who they're exalted. They're on the top of the rock only to come tumbling down because they really didn't have the foundation. And they were not humble. They exalted themselves, and they were humiliated. So I don't want to be a part of that crowd. I humiliate myself pretty often by myself. I don't need anybody else's help. So I want to live in this other part. I want to be this part that is, I'm going to humble myself so that I can live an exalted life. So to live in greatness God intended me for and you for, I need to start with a servant heart. I want you in Church Online, say that out loud with me. Start with a servant heart. So I want that to stick in your head this week. I want it to be one of those things that you remember as you're going through the week, and you remember, I'm going to begin to build a foundation, a great foundation, so that eventually those giant dreams that I dream can come true because I built a big enough foundation of life for them to be built on. And I'm going to start with a servant heart. So this passage we're going to use this week and next week, this is another one of those passages where Jesus was beginning to transition. He was moving from the teacher-instructor to the friend. Forgive me, my allergies are going bonkers this weekend, so I lost my voice a couple times. But Jesus says a few passages after what we're going to read today, he says, I now consider you friends, and I'm talking to you as a friend, no longer as your teacher. So he's shifting, and he's beginning to give them the parting words. Hey, here's the most important last words I'm going to share with you. So beginning in verse 7, he said, "But if you remain in me, and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want, and it will be granted." So the dilemma is, this is where we get out of sequence. We immediately go to, I want anything I want. I want it all, and I want it now. There's a song about that. Anyway, I want it all, and I want it now. And he said, well, there's more to this. Wait a minute. But if you remain in me. So the disciples, they got this, because what he's saying is they've been living for 3 years with him, and they were eating, sleeping, and breathing, following Jesus. I mean, they understood what he was saying here. He said, keep doing what you've been doing. Keep following me. Keep being followers of the way, as they were called later. Do what you've been doing, and remember my words. He went on to say, but you will produce much fruit. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. This brings great glory to the Father. I have loved you even as the Father has loved me. And he goes back to the remain in my love. So here's the real key verse in his transition here. When you obey my commandments. So go back to the first. You can have anything you want if or when you obey my commandments. When you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obeyed my Father's commandments and remain in his love. So he's saying, hey, I did what God told me to do. I came and I'm going to serve my mission. I did what he said. And because of that, I am living the purpose that I was made for. Now you do the same. And there's a few things here that we'll see in our points that we can do to stay in the purpose that Jesus has for us. So to start with a servant heart, I need to, one, remain in Jesus or be like Jesus. So, as I said, the disciples' goal was eat, sleep, breathe, being like Jesus, being like the rabbi. They walked in his dust. They did everything every day, all the time with Jesus for 3 years. And I can only imagine with 12 guys, at some point, that's definitely going to be uncomfortable and a little bit stinky and, different times. Sandals and all of that kind of thing, and, some arguments, and we'll talk about some of that coming up here in just a few minutes. So to be in Jesus 24/7, that was a big deal for 3 years for these guys. So one of the things in my life is a few years ago, I grew up in the church, and I had heard a lot about Jesus, and people had told me a lot about Jesus, but I really wanted to just kind of wipe the slate clean and hear it, learn it, and experience it for myself. So for a couple of years, 2 years plus, I only read my daily reading in the first 4 books of the New Testament, the Gospels. So I just stayed there because that's where Jesus' words are and the things about Jesus are there. And I just devoured that, and I was remaining in him in that time. I wanted to know, because I really didn't feel like I could live all that stuff if I really didn't know who he was and what he was really about and how that relationship worked for me in my life. So that was a really transformative time for me. And I was building a foundation that really has helped me with my understanding. So as we roll into Easter, I approach that with new eyes and completely different than I used to in my understanding. But if you remain in me, he said, and remain in my love. He's saying, stay the path, keep going forward, do what you've been doing, and remain in me. So we have a vision statement. And so that I don't confuse you, our mission statement is leading people who are far from God to be followers of Jesus. We lead people to Jesus, we train people to follow Jesus, and then we send people to lead for Jesus. That means sending you back into your community. Your mission is where you work, where you live, where you play. And so that's our mission, and that doesn't change. We're always going in that direction. But this is our vision statement. And what a vision statement does is it frames what it looks like when you begin to do that mission well. So we've written this, and we're not conceited or overly confident. This is written with the mindset of, this is what we hope to be. This is what we're striving for. So let's read this out loud together. Church Online, join in. We are a powerful resource for leading people to live more like Jesus and to discover and fulfill their God-given purpose. So that's the second part. There's 3 parts. You can go to alivechurch.com and read under our New to Alive, our mission, our vision, our values, what we believe in. But this is the second part of that vision, and I want you to catch this. We are leading people to live more like Mike. No, we're not. No, we're not leading people to be more like Jeff. We're not leading people to be more like Alive Church. We're leading people to be more like Jesus and to discover and fulfill their God-given purpose. And if you're just checking out this church thing and you don't know yet, you have a purpose. God created you with a great purpose in mind, and he has amazing things for you, and we want to help you discover and live that purpose in great fulfillment in your life. And that's part of what we do at Alive, and we hope to continue to get better and better and better at this. So we have a series launching in 2 weeks. It's called Jesus Uncensored. The whole idea is to be in Jesus, to understand who he was and what he did and why he did it and what he said, and primarily focusing on Holy Week and all of the things that happened that week and what that means to us today and what that can mean for us in our lives today. Jeff's going to really do a great job. He's been working on this for a while, and I'm really excited about it because we get to explore a little bit more of the depth of who Jesus is and what he did. So in Mark, this is another passage. So this is where those disciples began to have some bickering amongst them. And they all wanted to be the greatest. And so they started arguing. I want to be the greatest. No, I want to be the greatest. No. And in a few cases, their moms even got involved and said, I want these guys to be the greatest. And Jesus several times brought them together, and he said, wait a minute, guys, you got to get this. This is really foundationally important. So he sat down and called the 12, and he said to them, if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. So crashing their hopes at that point. Well, I wanted to be the greatest. Well, if you're going to be the greatest, then you have to be the what? Servant of all. So he's laying out this foundation. No, you got to get this. You have to live at a servant level if you are going to be great at all. So we have to start with a servant heart. I want you to really get that sunk in today and really take that with you this week. Start with a servant heart. Build that foundation and understanding of what it means to serve your spouse. As Jeff talked last week, he gave us that one thing to be the change in our relationships. To be the change means this. Start with a servant heart. How can I serve in my relationship? How can I serve in my marriage? How can I serve my kids? How can I serve at my work? How can I serve my employees? Whatever that may be for you in all of those areas of our lives. We have to start with a servant heart. So to start with a servant heart, I need to remain in Jesus. And 2, Jesus' words need to remain in me. In other words, do what it says. We're really big on that. Jesus' brother, James, goes on a little bit later in the New Testament to say, hey, you're foolish if you're just hearing the words and not doing anything. That makes sense, right? So in my past, I wasn't very good at taking better care of my body. So I'm doing a better job now. I'm learning more. But I knew a few years ago that I needed to eat better. I needed to get more exercise, and I needed to get more sleep because my doctor told me every time I went and saw him. And then I went and saw a specialist, and they said, you know what you need to do? You need to. And so I got it. They said it over and over again. But I didn't live that way. I knew the truth, but I didn't live that way. And so much of what we know, we don't necessarily live it successfully. Christ followers, we know a lot of stuff that we don't live on a daily basis. And again, that's why we're here, to challenge you every weekend to go out this week and do what you're learning. Live it out. Be active. So again, in our passage in John 15, 7 through 10, he said, my words remain in you. For his words to be in you, it means you've embraced it, you've devoured it, you're living it. Everything that you do is framed in his words. And then he went on to say, when you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. Because you do that, then the natural outpouring is producing fruit and reaching out to those around you and being like Jesus. So Peter was one of those 12 guys that hung out with Jesus for 3 years. And we see kind of a portrait of Peter. He was the most stubborn, the most loud, the most brash. I mean, it took him a few times to get an idea. So here he's got it. And so he wrote about it too. And he basically re-summarized Jesus. He said, God has given each of you a gift from his great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve. And who are we serving? One another. Who's one another? Look around you. I'd like to introduce you to one another. That's what he's talking about. We. us, those who call themselves followers of Jesus, we are one another. So use your gifts that you've been given to serve one another. Jesus said it. His disciples said it in multiple places. There were so many passages. I really had a hard time removing them this week of great passages of Jesus and the disciples talking about being a servant and being a great servant leader and serving one another in love. So our core value here at Alive that speaks to this topic, serving, is intentional service. That means being intentional about developing the habit of serving. Serving one another, serving in your family, serving in your workplace, serving your employees, serving your customers. Because true greatness in your purpose comes when you develop that foundational habit of serving. So we want to be intentional about helping you discover that here at Alive. We want to help you, play the piano or sing or whatever that is in serving and using your gifts to serve one another. And in developing that, you're moving up and growing in and becoming the great person, the greatness, the purpose that Christ has for you in your life. So we're going to start with a servant heart. Let's have church online, and you guys read that out loud again. Start with a servant heart. Okay, you sounded a little more confident there. I'm beginning to believe you. I'm beginning to. So start with a servant heart. I need to remain in Jesus. I need Jesus' words to remain in me. I need to serve like Jesus. In other words, serve like his example. Serve in the way that he did and he said. So a few passages before where we were at, a few chapters before, again in John, chapter 13, 12 through 14, Jesus has gathered the disciples here, and this is in the final week of his life here on earth. And he said, when he had washed their feet and he put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, "Do you understand what I've done for you?" And at this point, they were like, no, not really. That was kind of weird. You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If then your Lord and teacher have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. So guys, if you'll bring those bowls in now. No, I'm just teasing. We're not going to do that. Some of you guys were really flinching and freaking out there. But the idea is that this is an example. It was culturally relevant for their day. They wore sandals. There were no, closed-toed socks and all of that kind of stuff going on. So when you would come into a house, a servant, the lowest member of culture, would wash your feet. And in this circumstance, Jesus washed their feet, and he says, "Do you get this? Do you understand what I'm doing here? I'm setting the example for what you're going to do for each other and for others." And it's not just about watching each other's feet. It's about developing a servant heart, having a heart of serving one another no matter what. So Paul, who wasn't one of the 12, Paul, if you were to describe him, he started out as more like a guy that would be in ISIS today. He was literally killing Christians. And not with swords, they were doing it with stones. And so in one circumstance, there's a stoning. He's holding everybody's coats and cheering them on. And later on, he gets documentation from the religious leaders to go out and begin to kill these Christian people. And then he has a dramatic experience with Jesus on the road one day, and a bright light and all crazy, amazing things happened, and he was transformed. And then he began to learn from the disciples. And guess what they taught him? The same thing in Galatians. He said, "But don't use your freedom to satisfy your sinful nature. Instead, use your freedom to serve one another in love." The same phrase over and over and over again. Serve one another. Serve one another in love. So Paul, where did he get this? He got it from the disciples. And where did they get it? They got it from Jesus. The idea of serving is developing that foundation that we're going to need to be all that he wants us to be. So here's part one of our vision statement. Again, read this out loud. Church Online, join in. A live church is a life-changing experience that people are excited about sharing with others. Now, again, we're not being overly confident. We're not saying we're all that. We're saying this is what we hope to be. This is who we'd like to be. And the dynamic of that is we're only as good at this as your investment and serving one another. So it takes all of us locking arms together to be great. Because we don't want to be good here. We feel this is the ultimate goal in everyone's life, is that serving one another for the cause of Christ. There's nothing more important. Yeah, you've got jobs and all those things, but nothing is more important because this is somebody's eternity that is determined by how good we are. So we want to be great, right? And we want to be great together. And in doing that, we want to have a life-changing experience that people are excited about sharing with others. So the dynamic of that is we might not be all invested in that idea until it's our guest that shows up on a weekend, right? So on that weekend, maybe you've been investing in somebody for a long time. It's a mom, dad, brother, sister, daughter, friend, coworker, and you've been asking for a while, and suddenly they say, yeah, I think I'm going to come to church this weekend. Woo, wait a minute. Let's make sure yeah. So when they show up here, you hope that the greeters up front are amazing like they were today. And then when you get inside, the donuts and coffee is all laid out and perfect for them. And you hope the greeters in the lobby are amazing like they were today. And then you get in here and the ushers are amazing. And you're hoping the sound team does amazing like they always do. And the band is amazing. And you're certainly hoping it's Jeff here and not me, right? Whoa, who's that dude? No, my guest came. So we're very invested at that point in it being great. We want the experience to be great, a life-changing experience. And we want people excited about it. And we hope that for you. Hey, we fail sometimes, but we're going to get better and better. And with you and partnering together, we're going to do it better and better all the time. But it takes all of us to do this. So let's look at what you guys said about great bosses. I felt my pocket and my wrist vibrating, so I know I got some good responses. My best boss ever never failed me. He was always there when I needed him. Jesus. Yes, Jesus is the best boss ever. I would agree completely. But right after that is Jeff. You can tell him I said so. I'm just saying. With brownie points there. Jeff's a great boss. Let's see. Michael Scott, the world's best boss. Dunder Mifflin. You get that? Michael Scott? Okay. Some of you get that. All right. My best boss was my wife. All right. That's brownie points. Kudos for you. Yeah. I love working for myself. I'm not sure what to make of that. Would that be self-serving if you're serving in that context? I'm not sure. So you guys get this, that serving and true greatness, I hope you do, you understand that true greatness comes when we begin to understand the idea of having a servant heart, and we live in serving others. So Jesus was our greatest example, and he was, imagine, he was the best CEO of an organization ever. 2,000 years later, and people inside the church and outside the church have been trying to destroy it for years, and yet it's still around. Here we are, because Jesus got this serving thing, and he taught it to those disciples, and they taught it to others, and they lived it well. So this is, again, a perfect example. Jesus' own words here in Mark. He said, "But for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many." So Jesus understood serving. So take out your connection cards, and we want to talk about that for just a moment or two. On your My Next Step part, I'm going to challenge you. I want you to get invested and take this next step this week. I want to begin serving others at a live church. And check that box, and if you know where you'd like to start, fill in the blank. If you don't, that's okay. We have an amazing team, guess what, that serves you in helping you find a place to serve. They're great at it, and they're working very hard to help you find your fit, get in the right spot where you can live in fulfillment, because we want to help you through practically serving here in the body to begin to understand this for your family, for your work, for every part of your life. So check that box, or check, I will continue to serve others at Alive Church. We have an amazing team here that lights and cameras and video and sound and kids and all the stuff, but we also have administrative folks that help during the week and do database work for us. And we have landscaping folks, and we have so many different things that happens here in and around this facility in order for it to be a great experience for others, that we can fit anybody anywhere. So there's really nothing that we can't find for you in the way of finding a fit for you. So what happens when we miss this concept? We bypass the servant, and what happens if we remove that base? You guys want to see it fall? You know you do. Some of you do. So what happens? Down it comes. When we don't develop that idea, that heart of serving, that's what can happen to us. So I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to close in prayer. I'm going to pray for you as you make those decisions this week, that you will follow through and you'll begin to live and develop the heart of a servant. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for all that you mean to us and all that you have done for us. Thank you for sending your son Jesus to die. And as we look towards Easter, we're just so grateful. Our hearts are so grateful that we discovered this amazing thing that you call grace for us. The forgiveness in our lives that we have to move forward without all the regret of our past. We thank you that we can serve and begin to develop a servant heart like Jesus. We want to be more like him and spend our lives discovering and being every day a little bit more like Jesus. If you're here today and you haven't begun that journey, that's the first step. And you can just pray this simple prayer with me and begin to follow Jesus and discover this great and fulfilling life. Just pray this prayer. Jesus, I choose to follow you today. I believe you are who you said you are. And I am going to follow you as of today. Thank you for forgiving my sins and wiping the past clean, the slate clean, so I don't have to live in regret anymore. Thank you for all that you mean to me and the purpose that I'm going to find in the future with you. I pray, Father, today for all these decisions that everyone is making, that you would give them the strength and the determination to follow through and begin to live in that fulfilled great life that you intended for each and every one of us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thanks, Mike.
Watch the mess.
Walk away.